Good afternoon. Welcome to our Committee of the Whole for Tuesday, June the 18th, 2019. I'd like to call this meeting to order at this time and ask if there's any declaration of interest. Seeing none, I will move to community announcements. On Wednesday, June the 12th, former MPP Julia Monroe passed away. Julie began her career with the Ontario Legislature in 1995 as the MPP of Durham York, York North, and York Simcoe. She retired in 2018, having achieved being the longest-serving female MPP in the history of the province of Ontario. I had the personal pleasure of working with Julie on many activities and initiatives and truly admired her leadership, her knowledge, and her passion for the community. She will most certainly be missed. May we now honor Julia with a moment of silence. Please stand. Thank you. Community announcements. I never remember where we started the last time, so someone help me. Who's got some really exciting things they want to share first off today? Kathy. Councillor Morton. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think we're all going to be attending the same things over the past few days, but I was in attendance with the Building Industry Luncheon, and then again just a few hours later, the Conservation Gala. I also attended, along with other members of council, the Raise the Woof dog party on Saturday, and I'm just going to actually let some other ones go into a little bit further on that. But I would like to mention that the North Union CRCC dinner is on the 19th, and the Hall Landing Church Supper is also being held on the 27th. So if anyone has not got tickets for that, maybe you might want to get in touch with them. So that's it, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Persicini.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Attended the Sharon Temple's Heritage Celebration. It was very nice, and we also attended the luncheon for the barbecue lunch for the staff, raising the EG flag for the Pride Parade, the building on Love Park as well, with Councillor Morton, and also the 31st annual conservation dinner, raising the roof, woof, woof, and which was exciting. And the event fire safety at the beer store, and Julia Monroe visitations. So there seems to be we're all really busy this month. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you. Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Attended a lot of things that have already been mentioned, but a couple that I'd like to mention too. That Raise the Woof event was very well attended, I thought. Their intentions are to try and grow that event. It would be very nice to see. They have some grand plans. The South Lake Public Information Center or session last night on the future of healthcare in the community was not very well attended. We had a little bit of a chat about that. Hopefully they're going to come back with some more information in the fall, and I don't think it was through any fault of it not being advertised. It was advertised a lot. It was out there. It just wasn't very well attended. I'd also like to mention the Meadow Restoration Project. I went to an information session about that back on early part of June. So that's a Lake Simcoe Conservation initiative, and it looks like it will really change the look of that river valley, you might say, in the area east of Yonge and Mount Albert Road. And I think it's also worth mentioning, Councillor Morton also already mentioned the strawberry suppers that are coming up. There is a little bit of an issue about the strawberries not being ready, and they're going to have to travel a long, long way to get strawberries, so maybe the price goes up. You might want to get your tickets early.
Councillor Roy DiClemente.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As I always look forward, just a couple of updates on some of the things that the committees that I'm liaison to are working on. The Sharon Temple is obviously very excited about their upcoming Canada Day festivities that they do in conjunction and partnership with us, 11 to 4 on July 1st. They're also planning the first ever citizenship ceremony to be held here in East Gwillimbury that ever. They're going to be hosting it on August 14th of this coming August. And they've got some really exciting things happening with the foundation that's run by John Ralston Saul. There's going to be some roundtables with the citizens discussing their journey and their pathways to becoming a citizen. And our newly created Sharon Queensville Community Group is also going to be coordinating a potluck to follow the ceremony. So that's going to be a meal for about 150 people. So that's a nice undertaking. And as well, that committee is also going to be participating in some of the parks openings that are taking place in Sharon and Queensville over the next few weeks. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Crone.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I really don't have much more to add than what's already been said. I'd just like to reiterate what Councillor Foster said about the consultation we went to last night for the South Lake healthcare team. It is regrettable that more people didn't show up. It was a very important issue, and but those in attendance, we did get to share about some of the things that we'd like to see change and opportunities that exist certainly in East Gwillimbury. Apart from that, the Strawberry Supper is coming up tomorrow night, so please come on out and get it for the North Union Hall. And on a personal note, I just want to give a thanks to Julia Monroe for her public service, a dedicated public service, and we owe her a great debt. So that's all for me, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Crothers.
Thank you. My focus the last week or so has been on my son's wedding. I got married on Saturday, so I haven't been at as many community events as I would have liked. But with that behind us, we're now back full-time on all these strawberry suppers that are coming up. The one event I wanted to mention was the raising of the pride flag. We had such positive feedback from so many people on that. A lot of people came out, and we're very pleased to see that happening. So thanks, staff, for getting that organized so quickly. Really appreciate that. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, it has been a busy time, and I think it will be now that the weather has changed. The meadow restoration, as Councillor Foster had talked about, is going to be very exciting for us in East Gwillimbury because it's along the trail system and the river between the second concession and Yonge Street. So stay tuned. I know that there's going to be some opportunities for planting and working with the project as time goes on. I had the opportunity to attend the PIC for Rice Group Fill Management in Mount Albert, and it was very well attended, and I think that people got the information that they needed and wanted. So I continue to see how valuable the public information sessions really are. The Sharon Temple Heritage Celebration, once again, was a wonderful evening, and thank you to all of our local developers that year after year support it. One who's in the audience right now. Thank you very much, because it couldn't be done without. I had the opportunity of attending the Holland Landing Firefighters Association 70th anniversary, and lots of pictures of past days in Holland Landing and people fighting fires was quite interesting. The Friends of the Library had a shabby chic sale over at the Temperance Hall, and I think they raised a great deal of money. It's always a social event as well. Not very often you go into a garage sale that's indoors and they've got cookies and coffee and tea and whatever, so it was a great great day. I've spent almost every Thursday since we last met at the farmers market, and it is going well, but could always use extra volunteers, so I would certainly put a hit out there for those who may have Thursdays available and get out and help them for a few hours to get a setup and clean up. It's a wonderful market that we have here, second to none in my mind. The car show, same thing, has been really going well. There were over 150 cars a week ago, and all kinds of, every kind of show car that you would want to see. We also had a new business open, the grand opening of the Rockwood Kitchens, and that's over at Green Lane and Yonge Street in the Costco Plaza, and they certainly have a wonderful display area. The dog event on Saturday was excellent, and the funds raised for this Partner Dogs Canada is for companion dogs. So they are training companion dogs for people in our community and a lot further away. They have many puppies who are looking for foster homes. You take them for a period of time and socialize them before they go into their companion training. And I could have brought 3 or 4 home. They just melt your heart. So if anybody is interested in that, maybe having the opportunity to have a commitment, a long term, it certainly is an opportunity to make a difference in somebody's life. I would like to give a great shout out to our recreation staff, and particularly our events. We had Jurassic Drive-In with the Raptors both Monday and Thursday. The Monday, I believe there were around 1,500 people at it. And Thursday, maybe a little less. I think people realized that they were just going to win, and so they didn't need to come to the event. But it really was exciting and something that the drive-in has not done for us, and a shout out to Peter for his time and effort, and it certainly cost him money not to show what he had in mind. So thank you to him. The decision was made not to charge anything when people came in. However, they could make a donation to our Youth and Community Initiatives Fund, and I'm pleased to say that there was over $1,500 donated. So all the way around, it was a really good event, and perhaps we'll have something else there as well. And with that, I will move on to item D, and that is deputations. And Mr. Clerk, if you could introduce our deputant, please.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor, the first deputant is D. Koren, Executive Director, Roots Connecting Communities, Inc., making a deputation to committee regarding an introduction of Roots Connecting Communities.
Welcome. Good to have you with us today.
Thank you. Dear Madam Mayor, council members and staff, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to present our organization to you. My name is Danielle Koren, and I'm the Executive Director of Roots Connecting Communities. So the purpose of today's presentation is to give you an overview of our organization. We are a York Region community-based non-for-profit organization, and we help people with life challenges get to where they need to go. We have been around for 30 years, and our services provide people who are dealing with life challenges a way to get around through timely, safe, affordable, and compassionate transportation. So we connect people to their communities with a caring conversation along the way. We are located in Sutton, but provide services for all York Region residents. Our operations are currently funded by CHETS, the Town of Georgina, York Region, and the Ontario Trillium Foundation. Last year, we did more than 15,000 rides for almost 1,000 unique clients. And this is a 38% growth compared to the year before. So for people who are facing social, physical, mental, and/or financial barriers to timely, safe, and compassionate transportation, we offer our volunteer transportation program. So volunteer drivers use their own vehicles to take our clients to destinations within as well as outside the York region for medical, social, banking, recreational purposes, and activities of daily living requirements. In addition, we have one community vehicle. So although most of our clients live in Georgina, 2.8% live in East Gwillimbury. So either a client reimburses the driver for the mileage, or our office bills a third-party organization, such as ODSP, an insurance company, or another community organization. A client can also apply for fee subsidy assistance. And in addition to that, all the rides to the food banks, food pantries, community meals are free of charge. Because we believe that if people don't have the funds to buy food, they also don't have the funds to get there. So the most frequent destination is the Ontario Addiction Treatment Centre, followed by the Georgina Community Food Pantry, South Lake. There's a church that offers many programs, Rose of Sharon, York Medical Centre, Canadian Mental Health Centre, and the Newmarket Food Pantry. In addition to our volunteer transportation program, we also offer bus trips to shopping centres, local special events and attractions, and these trips are aimed at reducing social exclusion. So, so our needed support at this moment is looking for outreach opportunities to get volunteers, to get corporations to sponsor rides, but also to get clients. Any questions or comments?
I met with Ms. Koren, I guess it's over a month ago now, we're just talking about what they do for the community, and realized that I wasn't very well versed in this organization, and I'm not sure that other members of council are either. And we talk often about our rural community and how the buses don't run out in many of those places, and yet the need is great. And so I had asked her to come and talk to us about it and introduce the organization, with the hope that we may be able to extend it into East Gwillimbury, a little more than 2.8. But for the first part, at least, is to make awareness for staff and for our council on the kind of support that is out there. We often talk about here and wonder how we can make a difference, and perhaps this is one of the ways. Councillor Persichini.
That's a great suggestion. I think this is great. I wasn't aware of it, and none of us were not aware of it. Maybe we could do we could do a blitz on the awareness. A lot of people are not aware of it. And this could be good for our community, and if there's ways we can do it, I think it'd be a great idea to do a blitz on it and let people know through the advertising or some sort of. It's a great program. Thank you for coming out. Thanks to the mayor.
Thank you. Other questions? Thank you very much. So we have a motion, be it resolved that the deputation by D. Koren, Executive Director, Roots Connecting Communities, Inc., regarding an introduction of Roots Connecting Communities be received. Moved by Councillor Roy D. Clemente.
If I may add to it,
Please.
I think further to Councillor Persichini's suggestion that we also direct staff to assist with outreach activities where appropriate.
Thank you. Any questions? All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you so much for being here. That's the only deputation I have, is that correct? No, we had a second one that arrived. I'm sorry.
No problem. Through you, Madam Mayor, there was an additional request. It's in relation to item J2. The deputant is A. Layton Evans Planning, representing Wycliffe, Thornridge, Sharon Corners Limited, making a deputation to committee regarding item J2, which is the Development Services Report P 2019-26 with regards to the same ownership. Thank you.
Welcome, good to have you with us this afternoon.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of council, for the opportunity to speak. My name is Adam Layton. I'm here on behalf of Wycliffe, Thornridge, Sharon Corners Limited, the owner of the properties at the northwest corner of Mount Albert Road and Leslie Street, or I guess the majority of the properties in that location. As council may recall, we were last before you in April for a public meeting, largely with regard to the comprehensive development plan that is envisioned for this property, as I'm showing here. The comprehensive plan includes, as part of the first phase, a retirement home, as part of a future second phase, a number of townhouse dwellings, as part of a third phase, a potential another apartment building and additional townhouses, and a mixed-use building. The phasing is just generally shown here. The reason I'm here before you today is as we are sort of in a housekeeping mode. We, as you recall, the Wycliffe Thornridge purchased the property at 19180 Leslie Street, which was this property in there, which is comprised of part of the property would be used for phase one, part of it for the future mixed-use building. It was acquired by the owners after the official plan amendment, which was passed last summer for the balance of the properties, was passed. So we had to file an additional official plan amendment to sort of bring that property into conformity with the rest of the lands to permit this comprehensive development. And additionally, we've also filed a zoning bylaw amendment to bring the zoning bylaw into conformity with the past official plan amendment. Key being that the retirement home is the first phase that is contemplated. We are working through a site plan application, which was submitted a few months ago. We are also working through a draft plan of subdivision, which you would have seen, I believe that was submitted last year as well. But we are before you today with a finalized official plan amendment, which would redesignate 19180 Leslie Street from low-density residential to residential mixed use in order to permit the contemplated uses, as well as a zoning bylaw amendment, and which implements an exception R6 zone to the majority, to most of the property. The future phases would have a holding provision applied with regard to servicing allocation. The retirement home, as you see, does not require servicing based on the town staff and will not require a hold provision. The reason that we're before you today is there is a recommendation for council to approve, or for the committee to approve the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment, and direct staff to bring the implementing bylaws forward to a future council meeting. Our request is to bring the implementing bylaws to council at tonight's meeting. We have worked with staff. These documents have been prepared and are ready to be reviewed. Again, we would request that this be brought forward. I know it is not your typical process, simply because we have a very aggressive timeline in order to realize the development of the retirement home. The owners and the operator are working very hard with staff to get the site plan rectified. We are moving forward with the consent application to create the legal property, all with the aim of having the retirement home potentially with shovels in the ground by the end of this year. The official plan amendment for 19180 Leslie Street has been exempted from regional approval, so approval of that document lies with the town, as does the zoning bylaw. And as we are now in the summer period, the next meeting that we would be able to go to, if we are not considered tonight, would be in July, which would significantly hold up the process in order to achieve the contemplated retirement home, which is envisioned to have a very nice presence along Mount Albert Road and provide some much-needed community amenities to the Sharon area. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions or any comments.
Thank you very much. Questions? You are a little bit down the agenda. If you don't mind, we'll follow our agenda through, and you're J2, which is about a page away, so.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a motion, please. Councillor Persicini, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. We are now at item E, and it is a presentation from our auditor. Welcome. Good to have you with us.
Great.
We always know it's the end of the season, we're ready for summer when you arrive here, so we're happy to have you here.
Thank you, Your Worship. Members of council, and I recognize there's a couple new people on council as well. My idea here is I'm going to go through two reports. Some are very similar to what you've always seen. For the new councillors, by all means, stop me and slow me down if you said, I've got questions. I'm going to go through this, what they call a year-end report. And for members of council, typically we try to, because you're part of the N6, the Northern 6 municipalities, I have various information. Generally, I'm able to share about how you're doing in comparison to those other municipalities, but not this year. None of the other 6 are prepared and have issued their statements yet. So I can't share that information because I don't have it. But you guys are ready. So on this report, I'm going to quickly highlight a few of the major highlights. So on page 2, it talks about where your revenues are. Your revenues are about $68 million this year. Compare that to $57 million last year. Your expenses this year are $43 million compared to $42 million last year. And a couple other quick highlights. So you have a thing called net financial assets. And these are your assets less whatever your current liabilities are, excluding your long-term or your tangible capital assets. And you always want to try to be in a positive position. Not all municipalities are able to be in a positive position. But at the end of 2018, you're at $32 million as a net financial asset. So you have money in the bank, you got receivables, and you have some debts, but you have $32 million more in net financial assets than you have of liabilities, which is a positive position to be in. And I will go through in more detail on the financial statements shortly. Your surplus this year is about $24 million. Last year was 14. But I'm going to quick caveat on that $24 million. This past year, with a couple developments that came in and some assumed tangible capital assets, that's almost $16 million of that contributions that came in that make up that $24 million. So you need to factor that in. It's not pure cash surpluses that came in. It's an accounting number, okay? And so now, after everything all said and done, your equity, your accumulated surplus is just over $200 million, which is good. You're a growing community. In 2014, the number was $142 million. That includes all the infrastructure, everything that's within the community. So 200 million is your target. So the next page just quickly highlights where your sources of revenues are. So it's very similar this year compared to last year. Your property taxes make up 32% of your revenues. Last year was also 32%. This year, the user fees have come down a little bit from 39 down to 25%. And that's because some of the building development charges and some of the engineering fees, they've come down a little bit. But you're still at 25%, still a growing community. You also have assumed assets of 24%. So things like Harvest Hills and some other developments that are now part of the community, that's now in your numbers, and that's part of that 24%. Every other ones, like charges, development, and grants and things like that, those are running pretty steady. In comparison, we talk about your expenses. So this year, your wages are about 46% as compared to your revenues, and your contracted services are at 28% of your total revenues. In comparison, it was 42 and 32% in retrospect. Everything else is running pretty steady. So you're aligned with your growth patterns. So here's where I would have talked about how you did in comparison to prior years and other N6 organizations. Unfortunately, I don't have that data, but I will give that to members of finance when I do get it. All right. So now I'm going to very, very briefly go over an exciting document, which is called the Consolidated Financial Statements. Is that able to be pulled up? Okay. Perfect. So right there. So I'm going to talk only on 3 main pages. No problem. So we've got what we call an audit report. It's a 2-page audit report. In the past, it used to be 1 page. Our auditing standards have kind of changed things a little bit in the way it looks. So now our audit opinion has to be the very, very first paragraph. It is to be at the very bottom. Still getting what I call a clean or an unqualified audit opinion, and it's on the consolidated statements of everything that the town has, which includes library and all the other departments. So it's what I call a clean or an unqualified opinion. If you had qualifications, that would be bad. You wouldn't want those. That would mean the management hasn't recorded something. So we give an audit opinion basically as of today. There are a little bit more oomph in some of the management responsibilities and auditors' responsibilities. I'm not going to go through every single line of those, but just recognize that there's more verbiage this year than there was in the past because our standards require that. So then I'm going to quickly highlight, we've talked in those pie charts about what your balance sheet looks like, your financial assets. So your total assets, excluding tangible capital assets, is $108 million. You can see the cash and the cash equivalents is up. It went from 86 million up to 97. There's a very strong plan in place as far as investing it and making sure that it's growing and doing what you need it to do. You have some taxes receivables, some accounts receivable. All those are in line with what we'd expect of a municipality your size. From there, then I have to subtract out the liabilities of the organization. These things are your obligatory reserves like development charges and gas tax revenues that are not yet spent. You got your employee benefits and any other bills that have come in. So after I pay for all those, after I accrue for those, you have your net financial assets of $32 million. It's been growing steadily over the last number of years, and I want to reemphasize, you are still in a very positive position in comparison to some of the other organizations that I've seen that aren't necessarily at that net financial asset position. The accounting value of your tangible capital assets is shown then below. And I say that it's an accounting value because these are depreciated. You build a road 5-10 years ago and you depreciate it. You're not necessarily going to sell it. That's not what the role is, but this is an accounting value. It's a depreciated value. It's not what it is worth today. That parkland that, let's say, was consumed or assumed by the municipality, that's on the books at the accounting value, at the historical value. And that value is $168 million. So, accumulated surplus, it's now 201. So I'm going to quickly go to page 22 of this. I'm going to quickly highlight that there are items, which we call reserves, which quickly highlight how that $201 million gets kind of separated. You can see it's a very long laundry list. It goes everywhere from working capital to planning acts to library asset replacements to library specials to community capital contributions. I'm going to quickly highlight, those are all fairly well in line with where you've been in the past. And they total $54.6 million. Those are your reserves. You add to that a little bit of supplementary taxes. So you now have $55 million in your total reserves, but there are some front-ended capital projects of $22 million. So you now have about $33 million to be able to account for it, on top of the $168 million of tangible capital assets. That's how we get to the total of your $201 million of accumulated surplus. So you have to look at those reserves and recognize that those are earmarked monies. That's reserves. The only other highlight I wanted to make for council is on page 16, which is note 6. And just quick highlight that there are some what I call obligatory reserves. These are monies that have been received. They're not yet revenue. These are like development charges. You received the cash, they're there, but they're not yet revenue. So there's almost 38 million, and it was 33 million last year. You've got some gas tax. You've received the money, you haven't spent it yet. It's $1.5 million. So between those kind of two items, that's why you have $39.8 million. It's shown as a liability, but those will be brought into revenue as you spend the money or issue credits. So at this basis, I'm going to pose it back to council if there are any questions.
Questions? Councillor Persicini.
It all looks good for us. I'm very happy, my personal opinion. In the next 3 to 5 years, what we need to do, because things are going to slow down because we haven't got enough infrastructure with the big piping and so on, what should we be conservative of what to watch or what we need to do to keep the momentum, going that way as we are doing today? A report, how do we protect ourselves? Is it, I know we don't have a crystal ball, but I'm just trying to figure out, what areas do we need to maintain, because we're not going to have enough units and we're not going to have enough before the big pipe comes.
Sure.
What should we be concerned so we don't get into that problem? Thank you.
Agreed, I don't have a crystal ball. But what I can attest, and I've seen other municipalities that have grown, is you also have to go through those growing pains, and you also have to make sure that you've got the controls and things like that in place to make sure that you're running the services and running your community the best that you feasibly can. I'll give you an example. So there's things like supplemental charges. These are things, people put swimming pools in their backyards or finish up their basements, but they may or may not tell the municipality that they've done so, because then their property taxes can possibly increase. So making sure that those types of things are caught up because people are coming. And you want to make sure that, they're paying the proper amount. I'm not saying too much, but I want to make sure that they're paying those. So those type of supplemental charges are one thing that I can see in past history that some municipalities haven't really gone after, and those can add up. The other thing is I understand that there's going to be some other infrastructure costs, and you want to make sure that you've appropriately planned for those. Budget those, make sure that they are staying on budget as well.
Councillor Koren.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Appreciate the presentation. It's informative as always. I think I was in the audience last year at this time when you were making your report, so it's nice to be on this side of the table now. You mentioned earlier on, and you may have killed one of my questions, but that you haven't done the other some of the other municipalities.
Right.
I'm going to take a guess, though, that you have some familiarity with what the numbers will be. And can you give us a sense, I won't hold you to it, of where we are trending favorably against other municipalities and areas where maybe we need to be mindful and where we might be trending unfavorably? Could you give us any insight to that?
I would kind of caveat that because I'm one of 450 partners. So it's other partners that have the hands-on those other audit files. So I don't know, I'm not privy to, let's say, King or Newmarket or any of those other ones. So my caveat is that yes, I can get a sense and a feel for what they're enduring, but I don't necessarily touch those files. But that being said, I do highlight that your net financial assets are continuing to be in a positive direction. Not all municipalities are, so you want to keep mindful of that. You want to keep collecting your taxes, receivables, you want to keep billing and keep doing things. So you may have a use for some of the cash over the next little bit because you will need to spend on some other infrastructure. So my suggestion is keeping mindful of those because they can do what I call a creep. They can certainly expand very quickly. And I would say in comparison to some of the other municipalities that are in part of that same kind of group, yeah, you want to, if you budget for, let's say, a new library, you want to make sure that it comes in as close and feasible. Otherwise, you might have to tailor what kind of services or what kind of structure you want to be able to fit it in with your budget. And I've seen that within some of the other municipalities.
You may have answered my next question, but I'll ask it anyway. If you were in my shoes, is there anything that you've read in these numbers
That is a very,
that should keep me up at night?
that's a very good question. I'm sure.
My question.
So at the conclusion of any audit, we talk about with management any possible issues, because we take what I call a risk-based approach to doing an audit. And we would converse with management if there's any control issues or anything else like that. And as you can appreciate, the municipality is only so size. There's not 1,000 people within the finance group. So we try to make sure that the control environment properly matches as things go. So my conversions with Mark and Warren and the rest of the finance group is they will see the management letter points and they'll be able to have a chance to converse it, but it's not quite yet finalized. But my sense is that there's nothing, I wouldn't be issuing an unqualified opinion if I thought that there were issues. Okay? Okay?
Councillor Roy DiClemente.
I guess what happens when you have new faces on council is that some of the questions get transferred over. That was the question I was going to ask you, as it is my tradition to ask you. I think that would have been the 9th time I would have asked you, Mr. Ventrcek. But happy that it was answered. And if it's appropriate if there's anything that staff need to bring to us once they've received that management letter, I'd be happy to hear about it and perhaps make some suggestions if something needs to change. But obviously it's an unqualified opinion, and so that's good news all around. Thank you.
Can I add one other last little point? Because the question was raised, is there anything else to be concerned about? My only other sense is, because you can see it with Wasaga Beach and Midland and some other municipalities, they've had what I call cyber security attacks. And sometimes people don't necessarily say, well, that's not going to happen to us, but it can cripple. And you need to take necessary precautions. So my suggestion to management is try to make sure that you're not into that same position. Take the necessary precautions. Do a review of it if you need to. So have that contemplation, because I have seen that can be costly and timely for getting accurate information. So.
Councillor Morton.
Actually, I do have some comments, but perhaps if there's other council members that would like to go first.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Crothers.
Thank you. That was actually a very good segue into what I want to ask about. I'm looking at risk management. As the town grows, we're taking on more and more risk. And I was wondering if other municipalities, if you're aware, do like a risk heat map where some of these things can be identified, such as the cyber threat. If our development charges drop off because we're not getting the building. I'm wondering if that's something that we should be looking at, doing a complete risk assessment of all of these different areas.
Very good question. My understanding is that management do review. So, for instance, like a capital asset risk management plan, those types of things have to be implemented and are being implemented. So those types of things are happening. I would pose it to management to basically try to ensure that from a risk management, any of those other types of things are addressed and let them go through that time and analysis to figure that out.
Okay, thank you. And so to management, if we could get some information on what's being done as far as looking at like a heat map or something like that, so we can understand where our risks are and what's being done to mitigate them. I'd appreciate that. Thanks.
Mr. Webster.
It's actually a timely question because we share an external auditor with the Northern 6 municipalities, and we also, one of our innovations that goes well back is we share a Region of York auditor, and we have for the past dozen years. And we get the ability to have 3 to 4 audits done a year. On a regular basis, I'd say we've probably done 3 cycles of overall risk assessment of the organization. And it is timely because I think as technology changes, innovation, the assets that we're assuming, we are probably due for an overall assessment of our organization for our next stream of audits that we will take a look at. Some of the other things that we are working on behind the scenes, and we want to bring them to council. Today we have a presentation on emergency management and the things that go on. year-round, many hundreds of man-hours or woman-hours that go into that initiative, and we thought that we would share that. Our asset management program is robust and growing, and we've just had some management sessions recently that we'd like to bring to council. So we're thinking we're ahead of the curve on a lot of these, and but we with respect to cyber security, recently we've had a great turnover of CAOs at the N6 table, and it is one of the ones that's come up as a priority, or maybe jointly. The 6 of us will take a look at some measures that we could do, and that's one of the abilities we have. So we will bring back the audit and some of the things that the N6 group is doing, and some other elements to exemplify to not just council but to the residents here of the many measures that we're taking to be a proactive, innovative municipality.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Councillor Morton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you, Mr. Ventrcek. I spent just over 2 hours last week with Warren, who explained this page by page by page, and you certainly have put a lot of time and effort into making it self-explanatory for many of us, and certainly for some of the newer members that haven't gone through one of these. I have over the few years, and so it was very clear to me, but Warren made it even clearer, and so for that I thank you, and you've done a wonderful job, and I hope that as we go forward, everything here we don't have to worry about.
Okay. Good stuff.
Madam Mayor, I'll turn the chair back to you.
Thank you. Councillor Morton, would you like to move this? No, well, first move this.
Yes, I will move the first one.
Thank you. All those in favor? And that's carried. And now we will move into corporate services with Councillor Morton in the chair.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We have heard the presentation, but I would like to find out if Mr. Ventrcek has anything that he would like to add to it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of comments. We did bring to you last month the unaudited financial statement or year-end summary, and through the audit process there were 2 items, one affecting the operating budget and one affecting water and wastewater, that were identified by staff and confirmed through that audit process. They've both been reflected in the reserve schedules that are attached to the financial statements. Other than that, it is exactly as you saw when you approved the unaudited financial statements in principle. So really no material changes from what you saw last time, and the report here is for your review and for your approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ventrcek. Do any members of committee have any other further questions for Mr. Ventrcek on this report? Okay, hearing none. Can I get a motion to approve the draft audited financial statement be received, and that the consolidated financial statements for the year ended December 31st, 2018, as attached, be approved? Councillor Persicini, all in favor of that motion? Motion's carried. Are there any other questions for Mr. Ventrcek concerning corporate services? Councillor Roy DiClemente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to make a motion that we receive Mr. Ventrcek's presentation, because I don't think we actually did that. So I want to make sure that we close that loop as well, please.
Yeah, we did? Yes. I moved it.
Motion withdrawn.
Hearing Mayor Haxon.
I just wanted to thank staff for the amount of time that they've put into the audit. I know that every year we wait in anticipation, and it gets larger, and when it gets larger, then I know there's far more work each year for all of staff. So please share our thanks not only to the folks that are here today, but also to some people behind the scenes that aren't here, but that support you through the audit process. I know it's long and onerous, and very pleased to see that everything is fine. Thank you.
So hearing nothing further under corporate services, Madam Mayor, I turn the chair back to you.
Thank you very much. We are now under legal and council support services with Councillor Foster in the chair.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We have just one memo before us today regarding meeting efficiency review. Mr. Horner, do you have anything to speak to this?
Just briefly, but it was before the election. Council was talking about whether or not there was a desire to have additional meetings in the evening, and so staff were instructed to go back and take a look at what others were doing and to give consideration to the possibility of adding some additional meetings to the evening meetings to the schedule. So I mean, what we've done at this point is we've looked at what others are doing in neighboring municipalities, and we've also looked at our own communication schedule. And I think from staff perspective, we're not really seeing a compelling reason to make the change in terms of introducing additional evening meetings. So at this point, what we're really recommending is we just stay the course in terms of the current structure. But of course, we'll take the direction from council, and we're in your hands.
Thank you, Mr. Horner. Can I have a mover to receive this memo? Councillor Persicini. And then do we have any questions from committee? Mayor Haxon.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Horner. It certainly makes sense that we continue on the way we are. I'm just wondering, I noticed in some of the other municipalities, there is some flexibility in summer schedules, in that some do not have any meetings in July and August, some only have it in July or not in August. And I'm wondering if we could have a look to see if in fact, are we meeting enough? Or where are we at? I know that we're very busy, and summertime is a very busy time for construction. I hear from time to time that we are not meeting until a certain date, and therefore things may be held up, and that's the last thing that we want to do. So I'm just wondering if we could assess that. Both, do we need to meet July and August, or do we need to meet more in the summer months?
We haven't done that exercise yet, but we can certainly do that and bring that back for the next meeting. I don't see why not.
Mr. Webster?
Through the chair, I guess I've been here a few years, so we have tried some different things over the years that I might be able to share, Madam Mayor, as both you and Councillor Morton have actually been at the table longer than I. But a lot of municipalities don't meet in the summer. I think that's a fact. We've tried everything from, we did one cycle, one summer, try one meeting, and it turned out to be jammed, and it was too much. We felt going to one has worked well, but I think what we could do is, rather than report back, let's take a look at what activity levels are like this July and August. And we can maybe in the fall, as we come forward, I think the clerk indicates that usually in September, they like to table the agenda for the next year, so there's some certainty of the meeting schedule, workshops, and at that time we might be able to better discuss. So I just wanted to offer that up as a potential move forward on your suggestion.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. That would be fine. I just wonder about where we stand, and an assessment would be helpful. Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Carruthers?
Thank you. I think I highlighted the line about the community open houses because I think that's important to residents. Sometimes the meetings are dry and there's very little interaction with the community, but coming out, people can get information on whatever subject is of a concern or interest to them. We say in here 2 to 3 community open houses. We've had one. Are there others that are scheduled?
We had our second full-scale one this year, and it was pretty successful as well. We had the ability to get significant comments on things like master plans or idling bylaws, our potential help, and it really gives an opportunity to get some genuine input. I think Southlake's exercise last evening was unfortunately an example. When you do a one-off, it kind of is difficult to generate interest. What we've thought is, rather than having 2 or 3 large-scale events, we'll try to bundle some workshop or some discussion topics in the fall. And that could be everything from budget input to the preliminary budget, to some of our other projects that are going on. But I think we're going to try to have maybe one keynote community open house a year towards the May-June timeframe, and we'll try to bundle the other topics in the fall, so that we're other than the statutory meetings, of course, which we have this meeting today at 7 o'clock. We try to put the statutory meetings at that 7 o'clock time. So if that's fair enough, that we're proposing that's the move forward strategy on that.
Thank you. I think the community open house, the last one we had, was such a huge success. I just want to put a plug in that we should be doing that again. Thank you very much.
Any further questions from committee? Councillor Roy DiClemente.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The report notes, or sorry, it's not a report, it's a memo. The memorandum says that staff are going to present a report on council meeting efficiency in the second quarter. Now, we're in the second quarter and we have a memo. Is there another report coming? Because there aren't any recommendations here for us to vote on. Mr.
Horner?
No, my apologies. We weren't particularizing between memo or report, but the idea behind this memo would be that this would fulfill that requirement.
Mr. Chair, I'm just reviewing the end, that there's a conclusion here, and that staff are proposing that the current meeting schedule be maintained, but we're not necessarily voting on that. So I've been vocal in my position that we should be holding more evening meetings, and that we should be trying to attract members of council and members of the public to the evening sessions, so that people can get things done during the day. So if this is how it's structured, then I won't be supporting receipt of the memo, because it doesn't seem to be a position for us to take one way or the other. So just advising committee. Thank you.
Mr. Horner, is that further information that can be built into what we're going to see further from here?
I think really the thought was that this would be the end of the exercise, frankly, or not. We're sort of reporting midway through, and the thought was, based on what we were seeing, and I guess the lack of commentary that we'd had from the public, the thought was that this would end the process. But if the direction from council is to continue, excuse me, and to look at opportunities to introduce additional evening meetings, then we'll certainly do that.
Thank you. Anything further, Councillor Morton?
I know that I was one of those people that commented on the need to have a few more evening meetings, and I do agree with the comments that Councillor Roy DiClemente has just said as well. I think there is an opportunity for residents to learn, and if they know that we're having these meetings, then I'm sure that many of them will try to come out, depending on what the subject might be about.
Anything further, Councillor Crothers?
I don't like when someone is forced to vote no on receipt, because this is being received. I understand the rationale that Councillor Roy DiClemente is giving. So I was wondering if it would be appropriate to put a motion on the floor, basically the conclusion here, that the current council meeting schedule be maintained for the balance of the term of council. We can vote on that and keep the receipt of the memo separate. Have two votes on, one on receipt and one on that the current council meeting schedule be maintained for the balance of the term of council. I would be happy to move that, because I think with the not just the live streaming, but the archived footage, that we have lots of opportunities for our residents to see the meetings. If they're busy during the day, they can certainly watch it at home at night, which is much more convenient than coming in. Again, the plug for more open houses, which are more interactive for people to come in. So I'm happy to move that the current council meeting schedule be maintained for the balance of the term.
Mr. Clerk, can we have that put up, so we're seeing what we're actually doing here?
Mr. Chair, may I make a friendly amendment?
Certainly can, go ahead.
I would, instead of the balance of the term of council, I would say for the next year. Like some of my colleagues, I have concerns. I would like to see more evening meetings myself. But I don't want to lock us in for the next 3 years. So let's wrestle with this. Let's do it for the next year with the schedule that's been put out. But what I'm hearing from my colleagues is that there is some, we're not all unified on this. And these are our meetings. We need to come to a common mind on this.
So there certainly does sound like there's an appetite to take this a little bit further. So can we have a vote on, first of all, receipt of the report? All in favor? And that's carried. Okay, before we go any further, Councillor Perzacchini?
Have we taken a survey what the public wants? If it's some sort of a, the feedback, I mean, it's not what we wanted. We were elected by those people out there, and I think we should serve them accordingly.
I'm not aware that we've received any commentary or requests, but I'll ask the clerk to confirm whether or not we've actually had that formal solicitation of input.
Because we're basically elected to do the job, and for people to tell us certain things to, so it suits their time and effort. So, it's not about our egos or anything that we have. We do the right thing for the right reason, and I think it's important that we listen what the public wants, and then we could kind of gather, and then we can always decide. I don't think it's premature to vote on something. We don't know what the people want out there.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, as Councillor Roy Clemente had previously indicated, this was a prior recommendation of the prior term of council. So this was a council initiated direction. Excuse me. This was not a public initiated objective. We have not had any feedback from the public, nor have we been directed to do so. I guess with the votes up and coming, we can certainly bring back a report later, as Mr. Webster had indicated, in the fall, that would sort of highlight some of that public input.
So can we wait for the fall? We'll do this amendment, but can we wait for the fall for that more information to actually have a motion at that time that we possibly consult with the public and take it further? Mayor Haxon?
Thank you. Traditionally, we set our calendar in September for the next year, and so we would be able, based on what we have before us here, that we would maintain the calendar we have now until 2020, so we would see it through the year and have the opportunity to work with the public to see if, in fact, they will fill the council chambers, or whether they're watching the live streaming, or is there something else that we're not doing that perhaps we should.
I like that.
So what we have in front of us, I think, would give us the information that we need and still maintain a calendar for 2020.
Okay, so can we move ahead with what was put forward by Councillor Carruthers and maintain that for 2020, as the mayor just mentioned? Can we have a vote on that? All in favor? Looks like one opposed, so that'll be carried. Anything further, Mr. Horner, from Legal and Counsel Support Services?
Nothing further.
Anything further from committee? Seeing none, I'll turn it back to you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. We have one item on the agenda. Many of our staff belong to professional organizations, as we do in the municipal world. And I wanted to speak about the Canadian Association of Municipal Administrators, CAMA, and an award that of recognition for our CAO, Tom Webster. The Canadian Association of Municipal Administrators, CAMA, Long-Serve Recognition Award Program recognizes and celebrates the dedication to the public service and municipal management of their members, which is a significant priority for this association. These awards are based on the number of years of full-time paid employment in municipal government in a management capacity, in this case, a chief administrative officer or reporting directly to a chief administrative officer. Awards are granted at 10 years and given in 5-year increments. This year, in our municipality, Thomas R. Webster, Chief Administrative Officer, was acknowledged for his commitment of 20 years to municipal service in a management capacity. I'm pleased on behalf of Council to recognize Mr. Webster for his ongoing support and leadership in the municipal profession. Congratulations, Mr. Webster, and I have a pin here that I'd like to present to you.
Well done. No, just a pretty face.
Mr. Webster's been with us 14 years. On July the 11th, it will be 14 years. So congratulations, and we look forward to many more years. Do you have anything that you would like to say at this time, Mr. Webster?
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of council. There's been a lot of changes over the last 14 years, that's for sure. A lot of them good, and I'm pretty proud of a few things. One is of the staff team that we've built over those years. I think it's a terrific group of leadership and of frontline workers, and one of the top teams in Ontario. I think we're pretty proud as well of our partnerships and innovation with the Northern 6 municipalities. I think we're real leaders and trendsetters in that initiative. And I look forward to not just being here for 14 years recently, but to many more years as well, working with yourself and members of council and this team. And thank you very much for this acknowledgement.
Thank you. With that, we will move on to Emergency and Community Safety Services with Councillor Roy DeClemente in the chair. You've got a lot on here today.
I do, thank you, Madam Mayor. At the risk of making another blunder, did we make a motion to receive that presentation? Okay, I'm right this time. Okay. I'll do it now. May I have a motion to receive the presentation to Mr. Webster, moved by Councillor Morton. All those in favor? And that motion is carried. Thank you. So we have a few items on our agenda today. The first item is Emergency and Community Safety Services presentation on emergency management and the overview of our program. Chief Dawson.
Madam Mayor, members of council, staff, and attendees, while my clerk colleagues are setting up here, I'm going to take this opportunity to introduce Chief Rob McKenzie. If Rob could come up, please. You have received, and I'm sure read, his bio, so I won't repeat that. I know Rob, as in the usual fashion, is going to set up meetings with each of you over the coming weeks and months. to have a discussion and to introduce if he hasn't had a chance prior to. But what I will add is that Rob has worked with EG and myself and exemplifies things that C.O. Webster just mentioned about collaboration and innovation. And I will remind some council and inform new council that Rob worked with us closely in the N6, Northern 6, with our fire master plans. And Rob certainly understands what many of you have heard from me ad nauseum about the 3 lines of defense: the proactivity of education, prevention, and of course suppression. So without further ado, Rob, the mic is yours.
Thank you, Chief, and thank you, Your Worship and members of council. I'm excited to be part of the, not only part of the fire department, but part of the senior management team. So I want to thank you for taking me on board.
Welcome. Thank you, Chief. Welcome, Assistant Chief.
Thank you. All right, so this quick and high-level overview of emergency management is meant to be a precursor into the report that is immediately following this. So think of it as what do we have, what are we doing about it, and what do we need? So we'll run through this pretty quickly. You can see the agenda here. We'll run through these 7 items in the next 5 to 10 minutes. So if you could go ahead. So legislation, what do we have? There are a couple pieces of legislation that are up on the screen there, namely the Provincial Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act, along with OREG 380, that really guide us through each municipality, all municipalities in Ontario, through of what the requirements are in emergency management. And emergency management, as some of the discussion has already taken place today, is really about risk assessment and how to prepare the community for not only a response to a disaster or a large-scale challenge, but also to help it to recover. Recovery, although not often mentioned, it really is the lengthy process. The emergency management professionals and practitioners say that 1 week of an emergency equals about 1 month of recovery or more. The municipal bylaws, and we'll get into that in the forthcoming report, it is required by council to pass bylaws that support emergency management. And the focus of emergency management, the theme, the modus operandi throughout Canada, let alone the province and the 440 odd municipalities therein, is about the shared responsibility. The local municipality owns the emergency, but we have many partners and resources to help us get through that. Part of the requirements are an annual, hence the forthcoming report, compliance criteria. And in that, there are about 16 items. I won't go through that. They are mentioned in the report. The good news story is that we continue, as we have over the previous years, to meet our compliance. This compliance, which has taken place at the end of 2018, very beginning of 2019, requires a formal submission and approval process. And last but not least is the annual report forthcoming. Next, please. Many of you will have seen the yellow binder. This is our emergency plan, which every municipality is required to have. And it sets out how you're going to deal with emergencies, declare emergencies, how the structure, which we'll talk about shortly, in your EOC or Emergency Operations Center, as well as provide appendices, the confidential part, of contacts, crisis communication, how we're going to deal with things on a boots on the ground functional manner. We don't have these yellow binders anymore. Several years ago we phased these out. The publicly available part of the emergency plan is available online. It has been for several years now, minus the appendices. And of course we have copies and resources in our emergency operations centers. So this is an emergency plan. Currently, the Emergency Operations Center is at Holland Landing Fire Station, Station 24 headquarters. Facilities is senior management working hard to provide a new one at the new ops center when that comes on board. Having an emergency operations center and a backup is a requirement under the provincial annual compliance. Incident management system. About 2014, we changed over and this is our command and control system in the EOC, the Emergency Operations Center, to bring us in line with the region and other municipalities. Very similar with some slight tweaking for East Gwillimbury in particular, and works for us. The one thing I will say about IMS is it's functional, not position-based. So no matter what your job is in the corporation, ideally the trained staff are able to walk in and functionally assume any positions within the Emergency Operations Center. Although not for today, anytime are there any questions, please feel free to contact myself or Chief Mackenzie. The emergency management coordination, we're in our third year, fourth year if you count the trial of the N4 and 6 municipalities. It was N4, then N6 came on, where we share a coordinator. One of the great things about emergency management is that copying, sharing, and doing the same is encouraged and applauded. So we are really since 2014 have come into a nice not only compliance but similarity with other municipalities in the region, and certainly the region itself. So some of the features of this are a common coordinator that spends time in each municipality. This common coordinator has a work plan and forms part of the agreement to provide annual exercises, which are a requirement under the Act. Training, emergency plan review, HIRA, which is their hazard identification and risk analysis, and we talked about risk earlier today. Every year, the region municipalities go together and we look at, and very simply, there are 3 categories. There's weather-related, technology such as cyber attacks, and of course transportation, whether it be trains, planes, or automobiles. Chief Mackenzie just attended recently, and there's another one coming up of a recent HIRA, so he's fully kitted out and aware of what's happening in EG. Ours haven't changed significantly, other than to add the cyber attack, which we'll be working with corporate services and IT, of course, as we continue to fill out our plans and our ability to handle emergencies in the future. So that's what we have. I've told you a little bit what we're doing about it, and here's what we need, but kind of in the pipeline stuff. About 18 months ago, we started, and we were one of the first, including the region, to do this, to introduce our corporate staff to active incidents and shooters, some of the things that have happened in the news in the last several years. That continues on with a rollout later this year of some specific plans. I mentioned earlier about emergency management is really about partnerships and innovation. I'd like to take this time to thank Chris Catania, who is here, and GM Carmazin, because they have developed one-page mini emergency plans for our front-facing facilities. Some of you may have heard me say this before, but the traditional first responders are often thought of fire, police, and paramedics. That's not the case. Often it is our frontline staff in parks, engineering, facilities that are dealing with emergencies, whether it be power outages, intruders, floods, things of that nature. So we need to give them the tools, design the tools, and give them the tools to get through the first 5 or 10 minutes so that when fire, police, and paramedics show up, the emergency is started off in a good recovery mode. In the pipeline, as I've already mentioned, the active shooter, we'll do some mini exercises here for panic buttons and so forth, and those will come through the year. So in addition to our annual compliance requirement of an annual emergency, which some councillors have attended in the past and current, we will do some more. So there are a lot of things, suffice to say, that are happening on a daily basis and many hundreds of hours of staff time to help us to meet that. The good news story is that we continue to meet that. I'll take a pause here for any questions.
Members of committee, any questions? I think you've been thorough then. I think one of the best examples of the thing that you spoke about as far as our facilities and our frontline staff was the incident that we had at the arena with the chlorine leak. And again, it was our frontline staff who were addressing it, and by the time your staff arrived, Chief, it was well underway. And so I think that's a really good example, and I hope it's a municipal best practice, because it's certainly a good example that we're setting for others. So I'll let you continue on since we don't have any questions.
Well, I think that would take us to the emergency management report, which you have in front of you. Again, in the conclusion, it's fairly succinct. It's a good news story. We have once again met with the bylaw, which is a requirement for council to pass annual bylaws. This is one of the asks in the appendix at the end. So unless there's any further questions.
Members of committee, any questions? Okay, so may I have a motion to receive Chief Dawson's presentation? So this would be item I1. Moved by Councillor Koren. All those in favor? And that motion is carried. And then I'll move to item I2, which is the annual review, and this is the report that accompanies the presentation. Any further questions? I'm hoping that folks had the chance to review the plan. Their link was provided. I think it says in there that it's our obligation to familiarize ourselves with it. So seeing that, may I have a motion to approve as presented? Moved by Councillor Morton. All those in favor? And that motion is carried. Item I3 is a report regarding parking enforcement and a memorandum of understanding with York Region. Chief Dawson, if you'd like to take the microphone.
Assuming a different microphone. This report is fairly straightforward. Manager Jennifer Nichols is here to answer any specific questions, but essentially this puts us in line with the rest of the municipalities in the region for parking. Something that, as you can see by the cost, isn't and hasn't been a huge matter. It is just a little bit of housekeeping now, and again brings us in line in a nice fashion. Thank you.
Members of committee, any questions? May I have a motion? Moved by Councillor Foster. All those in favor? And that motion is carried. Next item is a report regarding our idling control bylaw. Chief, anything further to add to this report that's before us?
Nothing to add. Again, Manager Nichols is here to answer any specific questions, but the good news story is this, again, brings us into alignment with many other municipalities before us. Thank you.
It sounds like we got some good feedback through that process while it was in draft form, and some changes were made in that process. So, members of committee, any questions? Sorry, Councillor Carruthers? The motion is moved by Councillor Carruthers. Any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that motion is carried. Last item on our agenda, number 5, is a verbal update that has a PowerPoint with it. And that is regarding our integrated response model, another good news story. Chief?
Through the chair, and with your approval, I'll present this from the chair, if you don't mind. Part of the many things we're doing is the partnership and collaboration and being innovative. Several years ago, we started down the road with police and paramedic services with this integrated response team model. And that was simply how to coordinate better emergency incidents such as active shooters. So it's been a long road, and but it's still going on and very successful because we're talking about cultural changes in all of the 3 services. And I would be remiss, although he's not here today, if we go to the next slide, to thank Deputy Chief Ryan Jago, Sergeant Doug Ritchie, and Tate Mitchell, Inspector Tate, Superintendent Tate Mitchell from Paramedic Services. So about 18 months ago, 2 years ago, this initiative, East Gwillimbury Police and Fire and Ambulance, was featured in a national fire industry magazine, Firefighting in Canada, you may recall. And just recently, it was also featured in the Blue Line, which is a police service. So the kudos and the applause and efforts go to these gentlemen with the support of their respective command teams, and this goes on. And I will add one more thing. We just received, or about to receive, a grant for the second year in a row from Firehouse Subs, and that grant will be targeted towards training and required equipment for this integrated response. I think it's called IRM now model. That is all. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. I think for me, the article also highlighted the fact that while they've created this integrated response model for these circumstances, that the conversations have begun for other for an enhanced working relationship between the three agencies, and so it's a good news story as well from that perspective. Members of committee, any questions? May I have a motion to receive to receive the verbal, as well as we'll make sure that we acknowledge the PowerPoint as well, Mr. Clerk, the presentation. Moved by Mayor Haxon. All those in favor? And that motion is carried. Is there anything further that you'd like to bring forward at this time, Chief Dawson?
With thanks, nothing further.
Members of committee, anything to raise under this area? Seeing none, I'll turn the chair back to you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. Excuse me. We are under item J, Development Services, with Councillor Koren in the chair.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We have a couple of items on the agenda. The first item is the Development Services memo, Ontario's Housing Supply Action Plan, Mass Minister of Housing and Municipal Affairs, letter dated May 14th, 2019. General Manager Ramuno, do you have any comments to add?
Yes, certainly, Mr. Chair. But before getting into the items, I'd just like to take a moment and introduce our new staff hire, Adam Robb, who's in the audience. So he's our latest addition to the Development Services group into the town of East Gwillimbury. I don't believe there's Adam. Council has met Adam. He's our new senior planner. He started just last week, June 10th. And he comes to us with a number of years of experience at the York regional level and the local level. He's got some background in heritage planning, housing strategies, and urban design and policy planning. So a great addition to the town. So just wanted to introduce Adam and welcome Adam to council and the senior management team.
Anyways, thank you, Your Worship and Council. I'm very excited to be here. I know the town has a very bright and exciting future ahead of it, and I'm looking forward to being involved in that planning process. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so the first item, and actually Adam actually prepared the information memo related to Council's request to come back with some information on the minister's More Homes, More Choice letter that was submitted a number of weeks ago. So this memo really outlines the government's housing plan to create additional supply and mix of housing, and based on 5 principles we've laid out in this memo. Again, as you know, this plan is being implemented through Bill 108, which was is in effect as of just early this June. Just in addition, there is some overlap with Bill 108 and the latest amendment to the growth plan, and I think I reported on that back in May with respect to the new growth plan objective of increasing the housing supply in the province. So it's really just information letter memo, the correspondence from the Minister of Municipal Affairs. Again, it was really just more of a information update to council. Our plan is to report back in some more detail later on when we receive the regulations, implementation regulations related to Bill 108, and they will probably be a couple months before we see those.
Thank you very much, and welcome to our new staff member. Could I have a mover for this? Please, moved by Councillor Persicini. Thank you. Are there any questions? Mayor Haxon.
Thank you very much. I went through these 5 points with quite a lot of interest. I'm not sure if we have any details yet or definitions. I had a question about ancillary building or structure, and what would be the definition of that?
Certainly through you, Mr. Chair. So that is a recent change to the Planning Act, and it's related to sort of the second suites legislation, whereas now there is as a right, permission to allow through municipal zoning, second suites, basement suites, additional flats within the main principal dwelling. This latest change allows for an additional accessory unit within an outbuilding, so within a coach house or a garden suite. So if a property does have a principal dwelling, but also currently contains a coach house, that could, with livable space, habitable space, that could contain, in essence, a third unit on that property.
Through you, Mr. Chair, does that mean a garage, a garden, a garden building, a shed?
Through you, Madam Mayor, it could. Again, we haven't really seen the regs on that, but my understanding to date is, yes, any accessory structure could contain additional suite. Again, it would have to meet sort of building code requirements, et cetera. But that's something that we'll report on further to council, because the other requirement there in the Planning Act also identifies that there is no, the municipalities cannot require additional parking space for those additional dwelling units. So that's another concern that we're going to have to factor into our future amendments to our zoning bylaw.
I guess the details are what we really need, and these are 5 points that have highlighted some areas that I think have been buzzwords for quite some time. I just wanted to ask your opinion on the number 5, the innovation of housing delivery. And quite often we have people in front of us, or sometimes at the grocery store, talking to us about an innovative idea about affordable housing, and ultimately it just doesn't fly. So I'm wondering if any thoughts on 5. We've often talked about East Gwillimbury being innovative and flexible in a lot of things. However, many times there's higher levels that do not meet with our ideas, and unfortunately they go astray.
Through you, Mr. Chair, and that's another good point, and I haven't really seen much information on that point with respect to the innovation criteria, but I think it probably relates to the change a number of years ago that came from the province in the building code with respect to allowing sort of stick-built, multiple-story apartments. So looking at creative ways to reduce the construction costs to provide housing. But again, that's going to be a point of interest for us in reporting back, as it may require changes as well, or some implications to the building code as well, because any new construction also has to comply with the building code. So it'll be interesting to see if there are any plans to make any changes to the current building code related to that innovative housing criteria.
Thank you. I just have one more, and I'm hoping that number 5 is going to address the concerns that our residents have as far as seniors housing and affordability, not wanting to be in an apartment or a condo, but something on the ground, small lots, bungalofts, and those kinds of things that we don't seem to have out there, but quite often by the time they deal with the cost of land, it just doesn't make good financial sense. Do you see that being an area where we might be able to, again, be flexible and innovative to have that need met?
Again, through you, Mr. Chair. Again, now that you raise that point, Madam Mayor, Yeah, I think one of the reasons for that 0.5 is really to deal with sort of different housing opportunities like the multi-generational home design. So I think that's probably now that you mention it, I think that is the intent. So that is something that I think would be of interest to us and most municipalities out there in the development industry. So it's something that we'll look forward to bringing back additional information to council on.
Perhaps this is the one where we had talked about having an entire subdivision with basement apartments, walkouts and whatever, and that it be built, purposely built with the parking in mind at that time. Looking forward to it. Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Carruthers.
Thank you. My first concern when I saw this was the reduced timelines, and I just wanted to hear from staff if these reduced timelines will present a problem. You know, trying to make decisions in 90 days when we want to make sure we have all the background information and it comes to council in a timely manner. Is that going to be an issue for us?
If you don't mind, I might answer this one. We put the planning aspects of this out of this report, but it's actually linked to 13 amendments to, this is the omnibus legislation amendment. So it's Planning Act, it's Development Charges Act, it's a number of different acts. And the bill is passed, but the regulations aren't. And the devil's in the detail. And that's where we're at right now. The legislature has closed in session. But what I can tell you is, as we're in here today, provincial staff are hosting 2 online teleconferences for staff. And so I've never seen it before in the province as a technique, but what they have is a 2:30 to 3:30 and a 4 to 5 o'clock session where it's interactive. And I think what it is, it's a way of a mass outreach by the province and saying there's consultation occurring. Okay, it'll be difficult, I think, to make your points on a teleconference call with potentially, 100 other municipalities on the same call. But we will do our best to get back to council once we know some of the more information on all the relevant impacts, everything from library funding to our community centers to one of the things that wasn't even discussed is the whole notion of affordable second units would have no development charges applicable to them as well. And so there's a lot of different detail there. And we'll do our best as a staff team to stay on top of it, and we'll definitely have to report further. And this is why it's useful to have the July and August sessions, frankly, because we have time set aside for us to update council as required.
And that's what concerns me is even meeting, once a month in the summer. We don't want rush decisions or some of these decisions where we have to ratify them the same day. So that I hope that we will push back if we feel that the timelines are too tight. My other comment was really covered by the mayor around parking. It really is a chicken and egg as far as parking versus transit goes. If we can build the houses closer together, then we can justify more transit. But if there isn't transit, then there has to be parking, which means the houses are farther apart. So I just hope that if we're looking at secondary units, that we are really considering parking because we already have an issue with that with previously planned developments. Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Roger Clemente.
It's not so much a question as I think it's been said that the devil is in the details, and we really need to wait until the regulations are released. I know we've been also copied on correspondence from the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, who's also staying on top of this. But the things that have been outlined here have a dramatic possibility to impact our ability to write our own ticket and to plan our own communities. And we've spent a lot of time and effort on an official plan and on a zoning bylaw and on secondary plans, and if some of that has to be thrown out the window in favor of some, and they may be good initiatives, but they may not be something that we would necessarily support, and I remain deeply concerned about how all of this will impact our ability to plan our own community. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Foster.
Couple of things. The CAO, I think, answered one of the questions I had about development charges. But something else that comes to mind, if we're looking at more of a mix of housing types and you're talking about garden suites and all kinds of things, is that going to mean a tremendous amount of work for staff to update planning acts, bylaws, that kind of thing? And what's your feeling on, will it make the rules more lax or more stringent to try to keep control?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Again, with respect to the accessory units within, or additional units within accessory dwellings on a property, we would have to look at amending our bylaw, or at least factoring that into our bylaw. But our bylaw already contains development standards and setbacks. So, you know, in a lot of our new communities, for instance, smaller lots, there really aren't going to be any opportunities for an accessory outbuilding to accommodate a new unit. It's really going to be on some of those larger properties that could meet our current setbacks and allow for the construction of an outbuilding to permit an additional unit. So it's something that we're going to have to look at, though, with respect to our bylaw and implementing the changes within our bylaw.
Are there any other questions? Okay, I think Mr. Webster's comments, the devil is in the details, is very appropriate. Okay, see no other questions. Can I have a vote? All in favor? Unopposed? Motion is carried. Second item on the agenda is the Development Services Planning Branch Report, Official Plan Amendment and Zoning Bylaw Amendment application by Wycliffe, Thornridge, Sharon Limited. Mr. Romano, do you have any comments on this?
Certainly, through you, Mr. Chair. I think Mr. Layton provided an overview of the application for council, and you know, we had our public planning meeting where we introduced the application a number of months ago. What's before council is really for council's consideration of the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment application. The official plan is really just adding, redesignating a small portion of property along Leslie Street, which was just a recent addition to the land holdings of Wycliffe Thornridge. And the zoning bylaw is really to implement the official plan and to facilitate the development as outlined in the conceptual plan. The next steps here, staff are currently reviewing with the region and other agencies the subdivision, which is really just to create the additional blocks, phasing blocks, but the site plan application. So our next report back to council, once council considers the OP and zoning, we'll be reporting back on the site plan application for the first phase being the seniors building, just a design and overall layout of that seniors building. So that'll be, you know, in another month or two. We're just finalizing our review within amongst the various departments and agencies. So what's before council is really the implementing consideration of the OP and zoning bylaw and the request to implement to enact those bylaws at this evening's council meeting.
Okay, thank you very much. Could I have a mover for this? Moved by Councillor Persicini. Do we have any questions? Mr. Clerk?
Sure, Mr. Chair, I just want to make sure what the resolution is if it's as presented or as requested by the deputant. I'll put the resolution up.
Okay. In the meantime, Councillor Carruthers, did you have a question?
Yeah. I just wanted to comment, although I'm in favor of the zoning changes and the retirement home, the site plan that we keep seeing shows an awful lot of townhomes on that property. And I think overall it's too dense, and I just wanted to get my comments out there while we're still early in the process. I know that's a future phase, but I wanted staff to know that I would not be in favor of the plan as it exists because of those extra townhomes that are squeezed in between the one building and the seniors' residence. Thanks.
Mr. Ramuno, the plan as it is today conforms with all bylaws and guidelines, does it not?
To you, Mr. Chair, yes, currently the conceptual plan with respect to the official plan, high-density designation. It is within the density requirements as set out in the OP. As Councillor Crothers mentioned, there are future phases, but we will have to report back on those future phases with respect to the unit count and the design and the build form. But the first phase would be the seniors building, but based on the OP that's in effect, the high density, it permits the range of uses and the densities as outlined thus so far.
Right, thank you. All right, so back to the clerk. We've been asked to ratify this today at the council, presuming we pass the resolution. Are there any concerns from committee if we pass this today at council? Councillor Persicini? Okay. Councillor Roy DiClemente.
It's just a matter of principle. I usually prefer that we wait. Yes, there is a period of more than 2 weeks in this circumstance. This isn't anything new that's before us. I think I don't necessarily wish to single this one item out, but if staff are recommending that we move all of our CWC recommendations, then that's one thing, which I know we've done in the past at our June meeting, is we've looked at everything and said, well, in order to move the business of the municipality forward, it makes sense to do so. So I don't have a huge issue, given that this has been before us on a number of occasions. We've done the official plan amendment for the other portions of the lands within the plan. So it's not necessarily something that that we should anticipate residents are going to be engaging with us within the next 2 weeks. But at the same time, as a matter of principle, I'm not usually in support of ratifying same day unless there's a good business case for it.
So are you supporting the ratification today?
Not at this time.
Okay. I just want to be clear. I personally do not have any issues supporting ratification tonight. I know, I don't disagree with Councillor Roy DiClemente. I think having that 2 weeks sober second thought is nice. I don't think my mind is going to change any on the outcome over the next, would actually probably be closer to 4 weeks on this, just to the way our meeting schedule shakes down. So on this particular occasion, I think we need to show some flexibility and ratify it tonight, but that's my opinion. So I guess I'm going to call a vote then, if we're all in favor of the amendment and sending it to council tonight. Councillor Roy DiClemente.
So are we voting on the amended motion, or are we voting on the amendment?
I'll ask Mr. Clerk, what's the proper way to go
I'm in support of the zoning piece, but if we're tying it to ratification tonight, then I'm wondering if we should be voting on the amendment first.
Mr. Clerk, your advice?
Certainly, if you want to move on the amendment first, I believe the main motion was passed by Councillor Persicini, but I don't know that we have an amending motion.
Was it not an amending motion to, no one's made the motion?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the motion that as presented in the agenda is the staff recommendations.
Correct.
The deputant made the request that council or that committee consider ratification tonight. So we're just highlighting that in terms of just visualization for committee members, but the main motion is that of council or that of staff's recommendations. So Councillor Persicini has moved those recommendations. We do not have an amending motion to amend the main motion at this point.
So we need somebody to make an amending motion then. Councillor Roy DiClemente.
Or what you can do is vote on Councillor Persicini's motion, and then someone else can make a second motion to say that we will ratify later.
I'm fine with that. So let's vote on Councillor Persicini's motion. All in favor? Okay, none opposed, motion carried. The amending motion that we ratified at council tonight, can someone make that? Councillor Morton? Okay. All in favor? Okay. Any opposed? 2. I'm in favor. Motion is carried. All right. That is it for Development Services. Back to you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. We are under Community Infrastructure and Environmental Services with Councillor Crothers in the chair.
Thank you. We have 2 items before you. The first one has a number of parts to the resolution, so I'm going to ask Mr. Molinari to take us through the report on the proposed waste collection tag program.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This report builds on our waste management strategy and essentially on our last updates and presentations with regards to this matter. And specifically, the report looks to do 3 things. We are looking to implement a collection tag program, eliminate an exemption list that's a legacy list that's been in place for some time, that has been somewhat inefficient for staff to manage and the contractor to complete. And also, thirdly, we're looking to pilot a free bag tag program on a pilot basis for approximately 1 year, and then come back to council with the framework of what that other program would look like in terms of providing for special circumstances that for things that we may not have thought about at this point in time. So that's essentially what the report does, and happy to answer any questions and go through the recommendations in detail if council wishes.
Thank you. Can I have someone just move the first one that this be received? Councillor Foster, is there any questions on any of the resolutions before us? Mayor Haxon?
Thank you. I'm just wondering, under the point that the waste limitations be abandoned in January 2020, is that enough time for those residents that have had this opportunity for a number of years?
Through Madam Chair. We've essentially looking at starting this thing in 2020, and by giving out some free bag tags to those individuals who are on the exemption list, we were proposing about a 6-month period that we would give them the equivalent of 6 months worth of bag tags that they could use, so that would reduce or ease the implementation of the overall program. And also for other residents, we were proposing to add 5 collection bag tags with the calendar in 2020, and that kind of gives everybody the opportunity to understand the program and use some of those tags.
Thank you. I had marked down here free tags with our calendar, so thank you, great minds. I'm wondering if there's an opportunity to move that up to December, only because December everybody has a lot of entertaining and extra, and I'm just wondering, for the sake of a collection date, if we could capture the holiday season as part of that. If not, I understand, but I just think it would be a nice way to kick it off for everybody.
Mr. Molinari?
Through you, Madam Chair, we can certainly try. I know there's a timing issue with respect to getting the calendar out, and if they can get it out in time, we'll see what we can do to make that happen.
Thank you. I should have pointed out that there is, the last recommendation is on page 7 of our agenda, and that includes the 6-month supply for people who are on the exemption list, as well as the 5 promotional waste collection tags. That might have just been missed there. It's on the second page. There's a lot of recommendations here in front of us. The 6 months supply of waste collection tags for those people who are on the exemption list don't have to be used within 6 months. So it really gives them a full year to phase out off the exemption list. Is there any other questions? Councillor Roy DeClemente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's kind of funny because my perception was that we were giving 6 months notice to the people who were on the exemption list, that starting in 6 months that they would have to start using the tag collection, and I felt that 6 months of free tags was actually somewhat generous is not the word I used here in my notes. And so for me, I thought that was quite a bit. So it's essentially a year's worth of free waste collection, or a notice that things are changing. And I thought that was as I said, generous. And so what I would like to suggest is in another municipality where I lived previously, those free bag tags were included in every waste calendar, so that it was an acknowledgement that, you know, once in a while people have a flex, and if those go out in the January calendar, then maybe people could use them. If we've got 6 months to let people know that they were coming, they could hang on to it for the first week of collection in January. And quite frankly, in my household, the New Year's Eve party generates almost as much waste as Santa's arrival. So from that perspective, I think we might be able to capture the holiday season. But what I was going to suggest, Madam Chair, was the clause that establishes the fees, the one that references the bylaw 2015-078. I was going to suggest that we incorporate that it's explicit that it be a $2 fee, and that it would be reviewed annually during the budget process and adjusted by recommendation to council by staff. Just so that we're very clear about what we're suggesting, and that there is room for, if things change in our waste management contract or collection, that we have the ability to adjust accordingly.
So does the rest of council want that $2 specifically stated in this, or is that something we want a little bit more flexibility on? I'm not seeing an appetite either way. Let's first move receipt. Terry has moved that. Let's just get a vote on that. All in favor of receipt? Carried. The rest of the recommendations, Councillor Roy Clemente, did you want to put forward a amendment to that? 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth one at the bottom of the page there.
I'd actually, if I could, I'd love to get a bit more perspective from other members of committee regarding the 6 months of free tags, whether that's sufficient, or whether it could be reduced. And from my perspective, I know Mayor Haxon felt that it was fair. I just didn't know what other
where
members
everyone else stands.
Where everyone else sort of sits on that. So
Yeah.
I appreciate hearing from them.
Okay, I'll just add that I did ask staff to look at the exemption list and see if we could get any more information. If houses have sold, then the new house wouldn't necessarily, shouldn't still be on the exemption list. So staff are going to see what they can do to look at that list before we're handing out all of these free tags. I did have a concern with the 6 months. I think that giving people an opportunity to come in and state their exemption, and I have no problem with giving people free tags if they have a legitimate exemption. And if we can get notices out now and have people come to us with their exemptions in advance, I think that would also be fair. I'm just cognizant of staff's time and how we're dealing with this. Councillor Crone.
It might help my thought process if I knew just how long our exemption list was.
Mr. Molinari.
Through you, Madam Chair, I believe there's approximately 780 homes on that, or residences on that particular exemption list, so it is fairly comprehensive.
You've just helped you've helped me decide how parsimonious I want to be. Thank you.
Anyone else would like to weigh in on this to help us decide whether we need to amend the 6 months supply? Councillor Roy Clemente.
For me, it was that on the midway down this page 6, that staff are provided discretion to provide waste collection tags to residents with special circumstances. And so with a 6-month notice from now until the end of the year, things are changing. We're moving to a bag tag collection. If you require tags and you have a special circumstance, please come to the customer care and plead your case. I think it provided me with a little bit of the ability for staff to say, okay, well, this one we know is a special care occupancy, and we can be lenient, and maybe in that circumstance they would give them 6 months, whereas the property that changed hands and was on the exemption list and didn't even know it, we would be saving ourselves some time and hassle. That was sort of where I was going with it. So my instinct was simply to strike the 6 month supply and move all of that forward. But again, as part of the discussion that we have here at this table, is to listen to the perspectives of others.
Okay. Councillor Koren?
Yeah, I could certainly support that. I think we give staff the flexibility to give up to a maximum of 6 months, and there will be folks that don't need that much. I would certainly hate to see a black market of garbage tags floating around out there, people profiting from this. Might be a revenue generator, but that's my thoughts.
How many tags will we be giving to each resident for the 6 months?
Through you, Madam Chair. Well, each household would get the 5 as part of the waste collection calendar, and then we would look at it on a case-by-case basis, depending on what the circumstance was. If the person needed bag tags for 2 weeks or a month or 6 months, whatever that would be, we would kind of look at it on an as-needed basis and look at the merits of what the request was.
I'm sorry, I was talking about people on the exemption list. That last recommendation, 6 months supply of waste collection tags to properties on the exemption list. How many would we be giving each property?
Through you, Madam Chair, it depends. The exemption list is specific to each property. There are some that have an exemption that gives them an extra 2 bags, and there are other properties where they might get 10 bags. So, again, each of those properties has come in and pleaded their case at some point in time, and additional, and that exemption is based on whatever that need was at the time.
Okay, thank you. So would council like to, or members of the committee, like to strike that last half line from the last recommendation? So this is on page 7. That the 6 month supply of waste collection tags to properties on the exemption list. If we strike that out and instead instruct staff to make contact with the people on the exemption list and allow them to plead their case. Mayor Haxon.
Thank you. I'm wondering if we can put up to 6 months, because as you start to work with them, perhaps they now have a service company that's going to come in and pick up that we're not. So up to might have people a little more motivated to get a secondary option.
I like that. Councillor Roy Clemente.
Madam Chair, hearing this, what I'll do is I'll give you a motion that I think it's now clause 1. So we've received, so the second clause in front of us is clause 1, that it be adopted as presented. Clause 2 be adopted as presented. Clause 3 be amended, that staff be provided discretion to provide up to 6 month worth of waste collection tags to residents with special circumstances free of charge on a pilot basis, and report back to council in approximately 1 year, and so on. Clause 4 be as presented. Clause 5 be amended to read that bylaw 2015-078, which establishes fees or charges for various services provided by the town of East Gwillimbury, be updated to incorporate a $2 fee for waste collection tags to be reviewed annually during the budget process and adjusted by recommendation to council. And that clause 6 be amended to remove the last 3 lines of the clause so that it would end with the 2020 waste calendar, period.
Okay, so my only issue with that is that the first amendment that you had stopped at 6 months, but there is people that will have legitimate exemptions that should continue past 6 months. So I think that we can't, I think we're crossing over 2 different parts of the resolution. So I would suggest 3 remain as is, and the last one be changed to, rather than 6 month supply, up to a 6 month supply.
I'm just going to point out that it's a pilot basis. So we're looking at a 1 year pilot.
Right.
So up to 6 months worth in a 1 year period, I think is more than generous. Especially given that we have a good understanding that some of these exemptions are on here because they're for profit, or they should be using a private service but aren't, and there's a significant cost to the municipality and the taxpayers who are actually trying to follow the rules and put out 2 bags every 2 weeks. So I'm fine to start this, and I just want to make sure that we have the framework to move forward in the short term, and then have staff tell us how it went.
Yeah. So my point being that there's some people who have a legitimate exemption who would be on for the whole year. So throughout the pilot and going forward past the pilot, there will be residents who will be identified with a legitimate exemption going forward. So that's why limiting legitimate exemptions to just 6 months, what does that person do for the balance of the year? So that clause is pertaining to new exemptions, not old exemptions. So that's new people that come forward and say, here's my legitimate exemption, and if staff approve it, then they get the extra bag or 2 bags or whatever it is for the remainder of the year. The last clause is for the people on the old exemption list that we don't know why they're on the exemption list and have anything up to 10 bags and fall into the circumstances that you're saying.
I think the point here is that we're trying to eliminate having an exemption list in the first place, and that if people have a requirement to put out more than 2 bags, then they have to purchase a tag for $2 and put that bag out. That's the second clause here, that the exemption list be abandoned. So what we're discussing is that transition period, which is approximately a year, where we would be getting people to get used to the idea that if they had more than 2 bags every 2 weeks, then they would have to purchase a tag. And we're giving them some leniency in that transition period. I think that's how we're trying to do it. I don't want to have us having a new exemption list because people have legitimate exemptions. That's why we have the program. You have $2, you get a tag, you put the garbage out.
Comments from others at the table? Not hearing any, so I'm going to ask, Councillor Persicini, go ahead.
Is there an easier way that someone could come up with, it's their responsibility, if they want to put more than 2 bags and just buy so many tags? It simplifies everything, and if I buy 50 tags, I get a discount or whatever. You purchase, you got them. Eliminate all this back and forth, freebie, this and that. I don't know. I mean, just a lot of mumbo jumbo here. There must be an easier way to deal with this, and just, I want to have 3 bags that day, so I buy a whole for the whole year. Come onto the front desk and buy the whole thing. I don't know. Maybe I'm not understanding this whole scenario. Maybe someone can explain. The smart guy or the smart people can.
I think that we're trying to do exactly what you say, Councillor Persicini, make it simple for the vast majority of our residents. That's exactly how it will work. But we want to provide staff with the flexibility. If someone comes forward and can't afford that and has a legitimate, often it's a medical issue that they're providing or they're producing excessive waste because of a medical condition at home. So we're not, I misspoke when I said exemption list. It's that when people need free tags, when they have, say, it's a medical issue and there's financial issues, they can come into the town and get a few free bags, right? So we're talking 1 or 2 people every now and again. It wouldn't be an exemption list that people would be put on because that's what got us into this mumbo jumbo, as you say. It would be an ongoing thing. If you need extra bag tags, there's some compassion at customer care to decide whether you qualify to get a couple of free bags, or whether it's a regular resident who just wants to put out more garbage and can afford to buy a few extra tags. Does that help clarify?
Yeah, I could just like the tax situation where people can't afford to pay the tax. So so I talked to Mr. Belchuk the way back there. We do help out people out there. So it's basically the same thing. I guess
Exactly.
I didn't get it, the mumbo jumbo.
Yeah. So I like the recommendations as put forward by staff. If someone would like to make an amendment to them, now would be the time. I'm sorry, Kathy, you had a question. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm really confused with this whole thing, only because it's not that I disagree with the fact that there are some people who will not stick to the 2-bag limit and tend to get rid of them in different areas. But the reality is I have traveled around a lot of the back roads lately, just checking this out to see how many bags of garbage are in the ditch. There's very, very few. So now we're penalizing the majority of the people having to pay that follow the rules and regulations and don't put their garbage in the ditch or wherever. And whether it's even our residents' garbage that's in that ditch. It's coming in from someplace else because they don't want to pay the money to buy the tags. So I'm a little torn on how I would support this until I see more of it. I mean, we're going to be charging people, we're going to be taking people off a list, and I don't know that that's really what we're here for. So I understand where staff are going with this and the costs that other people are resulting in with other people doing what they're doing with their garbage. But I don't see it that we have that big of a problem here in East Gwillimbury.
So the benefit to residents, they still don't pay for their 2 bags, just the same as always. So when you or I have an extra bag, we can either save it up and put it out when we don't have 2 bags, or we can take it to the waste transfer station. This gives us an additional opportunity to stick on a tag and have it picked up right away. So we don't have to take it to the transfer station or hold on to it to a week when we don't have our two bags. So no one's being penalized. It's an additional opportunity to those who are following the rules. And as far as taking people off a list, staff have concluded that the exemption list is old, and many properties have changed hands, so the exemptions may not apply. So staff are looking to clean up that list, and the easiest way to do it is to basically in 6 months cancel the list, giving people enough time to use their tags, get used to using the tags, and to come in and either reapply to get free tags or to find an alternate method of getting rid of their garbage if, as Councillor Rodi Clemente says, they're running a business or what have you. Does that help clarify it?
From your aspect, yes. I guess I'm fortunate to live in an area where if I have neighbors that have 1 extra bag of garbage, they come and ask me if they can put it at mine or everything else. So I guess I'm more fortunate than most people in certain areas. So.
And that would still apply. This would give like I said, it's an additional option. Nothing changes to people who are doing that. That can continue. This gives another option to people who don't want to go and bother their neighbors. If they want to just pay $2 and put a tag on, it gives them that option. Councillor Koren.
I appreciate where Councillor Morton's coming from. Certainly if this was a tag-only system, I would have a hard time supporting it. Living in the country as I do, I've had garbage dumped in my front yard, in the ditch in front of my house. It was I got on my gloves and I dug through it and I found out where it came from, and it was from out of town. It was from Stouffville. So, you know, they're dealing with their own thing. I think the tags will actually help reduce roadside dumping. I think we can't impact the folks in other municipalities. Right now, your only option is if you don't have a neighbor that you can share with, you have to take it to the waste station in Ravenshoe Road, which is not convenient at all. But for me, I just need a point of clarity, and if you'd indulge me, I should have asked this sooner. We kind of ride 2 horses when we're talking about, we say that you have 2 bags or 2 garbage cans that you can put out. Now, I will say, not me, my neighbor will put sometimes 3 bags in 1 garbage can. And if he puts out 2, he's actually, I would hope that this doesn't become a process by stealth in which we suddenly start limiting people to 2 bags, not 2 garbage cans, but 2 bags. I just want to make sure that we're still going to honor putting out the 2 garbage cans, regardless of how many physical bags may be in them. Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair, we're not looking to change the process on that at this point in time. So if that has been the process in those areas that they've been collecting, we're not looking to make those changes through this report. like to just kind of maintain the status quo. And the whole waste management process, it's an iterative process, and it gets very complicated quickly, as we've noted tonight. So what we're trying to do is just do small little incremental changes at a time. Waste management is probably the largest operational exercise that the town does. We visit every single property every week, and we try to do things in small incremental changes, and that's what we're trying to do through this report. So there'll be no changes other than the things that we're looking to implement as part of the recommendations.
Thank you. I appreciate that clarification. My neighbor will be very happy about that.
Thanks. And further to Councillor Morton's comments, I'm glad that you're not seeing the garbage in the ditch, but in my area, I picked up 8 full garbage bags this spring of garbage in my ditch. And I just put a note on it to the waste collection saying this came out of the ditch, please take the extra bags. And they were very good. But going forward, I would be able to come into the town and say, I've done a cleanup, I need 4 extra tags or whatever. And that would be a case where they could grant an exemption. So it cleans that up and makes it easier for residents who do want to dispose of their garbage in the proper way, as opposed to taking it up to Ravenshoe where there's a $10 minimum. Councillor Roy DiClemente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this is, I just wanted to clarify or comment for my colleagues. During the election, this was something that residents in the new areas of our community were asking me for, given that they've come from other places where they had the ability or that flexibility to purchase a tag and put an additional bag out. They wondered why we didn't have such a program. And as we can see from the chart on page 4 of the report, that is, it's a common practice in other places. So this is really just a service enhancement from my perspective. Thank you.
So we have, the first recommendation has been moved. We have 6 more. There's been a friendly amendment to the last one to say up to a 6-month supply of waste collection tags to properties on the exemption list. Can I have someone move those 6
Madam Chair, I believe I've already made the motion, actually. I reviewed it. I went through each clause of this resolution as a motion.
I'm sorry, I didn't realize you were moving it.
I had made that motion, yes,
Okay.
Madam Chair.
So there's a number of amendments in that motion that will need to get up on the screen. Yes, yes, please.
So I can review it again, Madam Chair. So the first clause remains as presented, so that would be that they implement a program. The second clause is that the exemption list be abandoned as presented. The third clause be amended to read that staff be provided discretion to provide up to 6 months' worth of and the rest remains the same. Clause 4 remains as presented. And then Clause 5, that bylaw 2015 dash, so we would be changing it to amend it to say, be updated to incorporate a $2 fee for waste collection tags, comma, to be reviewed annually during the budget process, and adjusted by recommendation to council. And the final clause would simply end with a period after the word calendar on the third from the bottom line. So we would be eliminating the 6-month supply since we've referenced it in the third clause. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And my apologies, I thought you were just suggesting those amendments. I didn't realize you were moving them. Okay, so we have one issue on here that I see as problematic, and that is after 6 months, people with legitimate exemption would have to be paying for their bags. So that would be someone who might have a medical issue, could be a senior who can't afford the extra bags. So I would like to take these each individually because I think that there could be some difference of opinion on clause by clause here. So the first clause is that staff implement a waste collection tag program as an enhanced level of service for properties on the curbside collection program commencing January 2020 to provide an effective mechanism to collect additional residential waste over the current residual waste limits. Oh, that's already been moved, so all in favor of that clause? That's carried. Any opposed? Seeing none. The next one, that the waste limit exemption list be abandoned in January 2020 to ensure that there is a fair and efficient collection program for all residential properties. Any questions or comments on that? All in favor? Any opposed? That one is carried. Now the next one I'm going to have to read, that staff be provided discretion to provide up to 6 months' worth of waste collection tags to residents with special circumstances free of charge on a pilot basis and report back to council in approximately 1 year with a program framework for consideration. So I'll just remind that that would mean that people after 6 months with legitimate excuse would not, staff would not have the discretion to provide them free of charge. Any comments or questions on that? Anyone who wants to make an amendment to that? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? I'm not seeing everyone's hands. I'm sorry, can we raise our hands higher? All those in favor? Thank you. Opposed? That's carried. And then the next one. That the bylaw which establishes the system for collection of waste be amended to incorporate a provision of waste collection tags for waste in excess of the current waste limits. Any questions or comments? All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, that's carried. Next, the staff conduct, that the bylaw which establishes fees or charges for various services provided by the town of East Gwillimbury be updated to incorporate $2 fee for waste collection tags to be reviewed annually during the budget process and adjusted by recommendation to council. Any questions or comments on that? Seeing none, all in favor? That one is carried. And next, that staff conduct enhanced promotion education of the waste changes prior to implementation in 2020, including the distribution of 5 free promotional waste collection tags in 2020 waste calendar. Any questions or comments on that? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Mr. Molinari, any further comments on this?
Nothing further at this time, thank you.
Okay. Moving on to our second item, which is the municipal services pilot for condominiums update. Mr. Molinari.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is proposed pilot includes provision for water and waste collection services to some of our condominium developments, and we had originally envisioned entering into an agreement with one particular condominium corp in order to pilot this on a 1-year basis. And I guess staff had worked with the condo corp and provided some requirements and sometime last year, and there were some difficulties in pulling some of that information together. Since that time, we met with the condo corp last week, and over the past few days, we've actually gotten most of those items put together, with the exception of hammering out the final details on the securities that would be required. But we're fairly confident that we'll be able to find a security mechanism that works for both the condo corp and for the town, and we feel that that's something that is not that far away from being in hand. So we would likely be moving forward with that particular agreement, and there's also another condo corp that is also requesting a similar treatment to be part of the pilot, and we're looking at moving forward with both of those on a pilot basis for 1 year, and then return to council with the some of the feedback and establish the framework for how this might be rolled out to other condos as they come in through the development process.
Thank you. This is here for receipt. Can I have someone move receipt? Councillor Persicini. Does anyone have any questions or comments on this? Councillor Roy DiClemente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just curious as to what the volume or what the amount of money is that we're looking for as far as a letter of credit. I know that these are both relatively small little communities. I think there's about 29 units in each of them. So I'm just wondering if that's the stumbling block, if it's a huge dollar amount, if staff could advise us what they're requesting. And if it's too much, is there other letters of credit on file that we might be able to tap into?
Mr. Molinari.
Through you, Madam Chair. We were initially requesting approximately $10,000, which would provide sufficient funds to pay contractors that are going in there and doing work on the condominium's behalf that the town would ultimately be paying, and we wanted to make sure there were sufficient securities in place in order to make sure that the town itself was not put at risk financially. I guess part of the next discussions are how do we get to that $10,000 range? Maybe there's a way of doing that incrementally over time so that it's not such a hit on day one. And those are some of the discussions that we're working with Mr. Horner and the Condo Corp in order to deliver.
Thank you. Any other comments? All in favor of receipt? And that's carried. Any other comments, General Manager Molinari?
Just one further one, and that's just a reminder that this weekend is the curbside giveaway program, and residents are encouraged to participate and put some still good items out at the curb on Saturday between, I think it's 7 to 5.
Thank you. It's a great way to reuse. One of the R's we don't always get to do. Any other comments from members of the committee? Seeing none, I turn the chair back to you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. We're under item L, and that's Community Parks, Recreation and Culture with Councillor Persicini in the chair.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just one item here. We have a joint Community Parks, Recreation and Culture Development Service Report, CPR C2019-18, Sharon Temple Visitation Center Partnership Update. And the first item, that is it. And General Manager Carmason is not here, and we have a representative, Mr. Catania. Do you have any comments on this?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to update Council that as well the Sharon Temple Museum Society in this report have performed a couple of previous studies to deal with the visitor center. These studies were dated, and both these studies, though, identified the need for a visitor center, including improved administration space, functional gallery with secure artifact display and storage, as well as year-round educational programming. Currently, staff are assisting with the Sharon Temple Museum Society with gathering information to produce an updated business plan, site concept, site location, which would include part of the report with the potential of a heritage property being relocated, as well as a detailed financial strategy.
Thank you very much. Could I have a mover, please? Councillor, we have here Foster. Any questions from the rest of the committee on this matter? No. Seeing there's no more questions, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. And Mr. Catania, do you have anything else to add on this matter?
Through you, Mr. Chair, none at this time.
I'll bring it back to the mayor. Thank you.
Councillor Roy DiClemente.
Thank you. I had some other business under CPRC, but I can raise it under M.
Other business.
Oh, look, other business.
Here we go.
I just wanted to advise members of committee that I've received a resident concern regarding our permitting policies for the tennis courts, particularly at the Holland Landing Community Centre. What I wanted to just do was advise committee that this had been received. It missed our agenda deadline, so I will circulate the correspondence. I have met with this resident, as has Mr. Catania, and he has requested that I bring this matter forward for your folks' attention. So I'll circulate that. It will be placed on our agenda for our July council meeting, but I just wanted to let folks know that it had come in, that there were some issues or concerns that this resident was raising with our permitting policies, and I believe staff are already working on a response for us, but I wanted to just make sure that I was being transparent in how I was handling it. Thank you.
Thank you for being transparent. Any other business at this time? Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to bring forward a planning branch report 2019-22 that we dealt with June the 4th, last council meeting. It was a site plan application, and I had raised some questions about that at the time. Mr. Ramuno and I have talked about it since, and we think we have it all figured out. And I'd just like to let Mr. Ramuno give the remaining members of the committee his response.
Go ahead, please.
Sorry. Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. No, just to add just to clarify, I think I may have confused the matters back on June 4th when I said the home wasn't yet constructed model home, and Councillor Foster corrected me that the home does exist. They did apply for and receive a building permit. They constructed the home on lot 49, I believe, and the reason for the report is their request to convert that home and the adjacent lot to create some additional parking space to use that home and the lot beside it as a model home / sales office for their next phase of development. And that was the purpose for the site plan report to council. That home has been constructed, however. Eventually, when there's no need for that model home, the parking lot will be removed and they'll apply for a building permit on that a lot adjacent to that home. And again, just to clarify, it's located at the southwest corner of Doan Road and Silk Twist Drive. But in the future, moving forward, I think I've got staff working on a model home sales office policy that we'll be able to administer internally without bringing these site plan reports to council. And again, just to provide council with the ability that we won't be dealing with any of these site plan model homes without council first approving a subdivision for the development.
Thank you. Makes perfect sense. Any other business at this time? Seeing none, we will have an adjournment at 3:31, moved by Councillor Foster. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. We